Welcome to Evolving Educators. My name is Donda Slayton, and I'm here with my friend Chris Hurst.
Hey, Donda.
How's it going, Chris?
You know, it's going really well. I'm glad to be back here for another episode.
Yes, I love this space. I always say that, Chris, but it's just a great place. West Fork, we have some great facilities, though.
Yeah, we're very thankful that they let us borrow their space every time we have to film.
Yes, I love that. Well, today I'm really excited about this next guest that we have, Chris. He is going to talk about school safety, student safety, safety management plan, just all the things that go into that. This is so much more than I expected. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking we're going to talk about procedures of fire drills and, you know, weather events and things like that.
Sure.
And what we're finding is that really student safety, life safety, and this crisis management team that he's surrounded himself with is really integral to what we're trying to do with teaching kids to learn basic reading and writing.
Yeah. It's going on behind the scenes all the time. And, you know, we're so thankful that we're going to be joined today by Mr. Paul Batchelder.
Yes, Paul Batchelder. Can't wait. He is our Director of Life Safety. And so we will hear a good bit about his job and what it means to be the Director of Life Safety. I can't wait for this episode.
I can't either. When we come back from the break, we're going to be joined by Paul, and he's going to teach us a lot today.
Yes, it'll be great. Mr. Batchelder, thank you so much again for joining us. And one of the things we talk about in aspiring leaders are they're now in school is a little different. It used to just be principals. Now there's, you know, all kinds of leadership roles that you could follow and all kinds of pathways in the school world. And so you have a pretty unique story. So I'd love to hear, tell our listeners a little bit about your story and what brings you to something called life safety.
Sure, absolutely. So I actually got my start as an alternative certification educator. So I went through a program after getting my degree. And at the time, I was hired at the Learning Center, our DAEP, to be a high school science teacher. And so over the course of that year, got my certification after working through some test scores and things like that, things that everybody that's gone through that is aware of. Was fortunate enough to be voted Teacher of the Year for the campus, and then put in my application for the district because they choose for secondary and elementary, and I actually ended up with secondary Teacher of the Year in my first year of teaching.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so after that, it was kind of, where do I want to go from here? I loved what I was doing and working with those kids, but there was an opportunity to go learn under some veteran teachers at New Caney High School. And so I moved up there and taught conceptual chemistry, AP biology, things like that, just a couple of different sections. And then after that second year, moved into energy management. And it was one of those things where it was a new position for the district. And I thought, well, all I can do is say no, right? So I applied, and I tell everybody in the past that it's more of a, you know, I went in looking to know when I could start, not if I could get the job kind of attitude.
Sure. And
I guess that jumped out to them. And so that started a 9-year journey of being the energy education specialist. And then it kind of evolved through time, but we're able to reduce down the utility cost and save some money for the district and benefit over that almost a decade. But towards the tail end of that, we had a director that was retiring out on the operations side. And so at that time, they looked at a couple of guys, me being one of them, and said, okay, we're going to elevate these guys to director and then kind of divvy out the responsibilities. And so with that, I kept the energy management. I gained facility rental, and that was my introduction to safety, just school safety in general.
Oh, that's interesting. Just renting out facilities. Got the district and you, I guess, thinking about that.
Well, and
that role.
It was kind of like this 3-build hat, right? So I had energy management kind of working, and then I had to figure out facility rental, and then like, oh, we also want you to look at the generalized school safety because there's some stuff we need to make sure we're doing, kind of thing. And so I just kind of compartmentalized my time and worked through that. And as I started diving into the school safety stuff, like putting things in place and having meetings, meeting with the right people, it's kind of like a duck in water. It just really made a lot of sense to me. And over the course of a couple of years of working with that and doing these other things, I think others kind of noticed that as well. And I was asked, hey, can you do this full time? Like, we see this as a great need for the district, the way things are going. We want you to focus on this full time. So in 2019, I was established as the Director of Life Safety and Emergency Preparedness. And so that's the full-time gig now.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's always good, Chris, and we find as we develop as educators, we do find those things that we're more prone to being, maybe a passion area,
Sure.
like we see in Paul, or just things that we know we can make a greater impact. That's really what it's all about, evolving, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I love
Such an
that.
interesting story.
Yes.
Well, and it's like I enjoyed every leg of the journey. I hated leaving or energy management because at the time I was a state officer for the Texas Energy Managers Association. I was a president of the local club that was working out of Region 4 in Houston, was able to do a lot of cool leadership things as a part of that. But to step away from that and move into safety was a conscious choice to say, look, to me, this is another area of need. This is something that is extremely important, and I want to be able to give my full effort to it. And I'm being given the opportunity to do that. And so it was about like, okay, let's take that leap of faith and take the opportunity that's been laid here and go to work.
No, I love that. It sounds very promising, exciting for me. I like new challenges and things like that. And so that's probably what you saw, because life safety, what does that really even mean? So that's even an up and coming to me, another leg of the journey about leadership in the public school realm, is this life safety, campus safety. So what does that really mean in the context of schools?
So I kind of compartmentalize it into two different areas. So if we talk about life safety, I'm thinking more in terms of the systems that we put in place for a facility or school to keep the staff and students safe. That could be anything from fire alarm or even something that's more passive like security cameras to help us figure out what has happened, things like that. So that life safety system, what are we doing to put in place to kind of prevent or even mitigate, just keep things from not being as intense as they could be, should it happen. And then the emergency preparedness portion is really about like, what do we need to do from a training aspect for people to be prepared to respond to an emergency? And that's just one phase of emergency management. When you start digging into the weeds of this, you need to be able to respond, but there's things you should do before, like what you should do to prevent it, what you should do to mitigate it and be prepared. But then comes the response should something happen, and then the recovery phase is the longest part of that. If something happens, recovering from it is a focused effort and is a part of this cycle that you have to consider. And so working with each one of those phases and understanding, okay, are we focusing on facilities? That's more in the life safety realm. Are we focusing on people? That's emergency preparedness and working on their confidence to respond to an emergency.
Yes. What brought this about? The idea that the district and other districts for that matter, but our district particularly, made us think that your position was even needed.
So there's a couple of ways to look at that. I think that we've been given a ton of terrible examples that just kind of show the need for us to really focus on school safety and do everything that we can to keep staff and students safe. When I talk to administrators, I think I hear the conducive learning environment and things like that. And so from my perspective, like unless you feel safe, it's hard to foster that learning environment. And so we having that singular focus to look at that is a big part of that. The other part of that is we're hearing from legislators constantly as things happen, there are new requirements, new ideology about what we need to put in place to make sure staff and students are safe.
Well, and unfortunately, probably as outside events occur, that probably has an impact on some legislation and things that guidelines and things we should be doing, right?
Yes, and it's an evolution, right? We're seeing more stuff, so we need to do more things. And so everybody's responding in accordance to the incidents that take place. And so for us to have somebody that's focused on that, I do believe that's the best approach because it's not like I'm creating solutions in a vacuum. It's just somebody that kind of leads the effort and the conversations and puts the right people together to talk about the right topics at the right time.
I love that. And this position is evolving. This would not just be a list of things that you would do, right, Paul? I imagine that really the job description, based on what you said, is probably really difficult to develop because you're saying, I heard you say, have to be curious about things. You have to monitor systems and things like that. Well, those things are not, those are very fluid things.
Absolutely. And I'm very fortunate because I'm given the opportunity to learn the things that I need to learn, but also go get the training and then and I get the interaction with campus administrators and just saying, tell me what you need, because while I may not have the campus administration, experience directly, for me, I just need to be able to listen to those that are here and have those needs, and what are the needs that need to be met to make sure that the campus is safe from their eyes. And then having the district stuff to bring to them, it's like, hey, here's the training that we can offer, here's the things that we can find from a research perspective, and just making a holistic approach to, we're working as a team. And I think that's one of the most critical things about school safety in general is it's not about one person. It's about an entire team of people, and really the whole school district adopting a culture that makes school safety important. And then you kind of build subset teams to work through specific parts of that.
I love that. So as far as preparing for, the school emergency plan or school preparedness, I heard you use that word, but what are the components of a safety plan? How do we even put those things together? Where do you start?
So the first place to start is what they call a multi-hazard emergency operations plan. And that's a basic plan that governs the whole district on how to operate during an emergency. And so once you have that component in place, and a place like Texas School Safety Center would be a great place to research and see, like, what does that look like, and where can I find what the bones of a good template would be. That's where we all start. Mm-hmm. And so once you have that basic plan and you've put in the specific information for your district, then you can move to more hazard specific annexes, and would be like, what do we need to do in terms of severe weather or a hazmat situation? Because there's unique circumstances attached to those kinds of incidents that we want to have additional planning for. And so you start working through those, and the state's been really good about giving us templates to work through, but also putting in a hierarchy based off of what we are at most risk for. So things like severe weather, but one of the ones that we've completed recently is on cybersecurity, because that's just becoming more prevalent of an issue for incidents within school districts. And so there's things that are put in place. We work with the technology department to make sure that it lines up with our emergency operations plan. And then it's verified by hey, we're hitting all the marks according to what the state's expecting from us.
Chris, isn't that amazing how, you talked about technology.
Sure.
School safety then, it sounds like is just making its way through every facet of a campus life.
As it should.
Yes. And you even made me think of, for example, when I first started teaching, Paul, we would just be talking about, do you need some crackers for, your basic needs, right? Do you have food?
Sure.
And then when you come to school, are you cared for? Yep. And it's just, society is complex now. And information is complex. And then events happen, and then that changes things. That's just, very interesting how now school safety has made its way. It's not just about, teaching and learning. And, we have there's so many things now to consider. It's a full plate.
And I think depending on where you've been in your educational career, you have different exposures to school safety. Some might say that, I remember doing fire drills as a kid kind of thing, to where we progress now, where we've got 4 or 5 different drills that we're trying to do each semester, all that are specific responses. Because, for example, if you had a medical emergency in a hallway, how do you keep people from coming into the hallway so you can preserve the dignity of the patient while we're trying to get them the emergency services they need? We need to practice that, because if it's a high school and we're in the middle of a class change, we need to put things in place that allow us to first take care of the patient and then continue on with school business. So it ebbs and flows into normal operations. And our area is a fast growth area. So we see construction things. So it's nothing to see somebody breaks a gas line somewhere. Which way is the wind blowing? And how's that going to impact dismissal at an elementary campus? These are kinds of things that all are encompassed in this whole emergency management umbrella and being prepared for all kinds of scenarios. And that's why it has to be a multi-hazard emergency operations plan.
Yes. At the beginning, Chris, we probably, if you're like me, we were thinking, we're going to talk about fire drills and tornadoes and things like that. And now we see that it's every aspect of our life. We went from talking about fire drills to got line breaking.
Sure.
And then on the other side, it's not even about even having an unsafe person in the building. It's so that may be when we think about school safety, some people may go directly there. some person in the building to hurt us, right, Paul? However,
Absolutely.
it's even more complex than I ever imagined.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's not any one thing. That's just as important as being prepared for a hurricane or a flood or things like that, things that we've experienced. And so we need to look at all types of hazards and then have a response plan for each one of those. And based off of that, we have things happen, and then we have the after action part where we look at things afterward and say, okay, did it go according to plan? Did it go according to training? What was the level of confidence of those that had to respond to it in the first hand? And
that's actually a great question, Paul, that I have now that you've made me think of is, so if there is a situation that comes up, whatever, right, a tornado that rips the roof off or whatever happens, what process do you follow after the incident has happened?
So for me personally, the first thing is it's all about people, right? And so if something were to happen to you at your school, I'm going to come and see if you're okay.
And you have done that.
I want to see that you are okay first, not just from a physical standpoint, but mentally, how are you recovering from your incident? Because you didn't plan for that to happen to you.
Yeah.
Nobody did. And it takes a toll on people. And so once we know that people are okay, they're coming back to the deep breath and kind of recovered a little bit, then we can start being curious about what happened. What would we change if we could? What should we learn now that we're on this side of it? And how do we implement that into training? Because if we can take that experience and those feelings that come as a result of an incident, then we can leverage that into training and say, look, you don't want to be where we've been, and we want you to learn from our experiences, not mistakes, but just experiences, so that we can prove that we're building a better response plan. Because at the end of the day, we can train and prepare for all kinds of things, and then your circumstances will be different, and we won't be for something we trained for. Okay, so let's work with the team that we have, with the training that we have, and see our way through.
Sure. Well, and I can imagine every situation is going to be different because it's people involved, right? And so that would be a process to where even your best training still needs reflection and refinement in a process or a system. No, I love that. So talk to us a little bit about how TEA is involved with this. Sure. Did we get some mandate, or what happened? I know we have visits from Region 6, which is from TEA, sure, but expand on that a little bit and how they're involved in school safety.
So I would park you in a couple of different areas. One I want to talk about is TEA, their Office of School Safety and Security, which has been recently established. And basically their charge is going to be to conduct what they call a district vulnerability audit on like a 4-year cycle. Mm-hmm. And so what they're going to do is they're going to come into a school district and they're going to say, hey, according to legislation, school districts should have these components in place. We're going to evaluate the discrepancy of what should be in place and what you do have in place. And then we're going to figure out a timeline for being able to have all of those things in place. And so as they conduct these audits, my understanding is that they're going to look at that and say, all right, now that we've found the discrepancies, let's talk about a timeline for getting things into place, just as a way of kind of truing up school districts with all the things that they're legislatively required. And that's a big part of figuring out what needs to be done and making sure where we need to go moving forward. I think one of the other things that we need to mention here is the Texas School Safety Center, because they're a kind of like a research and best practices entity for school districts to reference with, where do I get started with a hazmat specific annex? Well, this is a place where you can start to get some information about specific toolkits that help you manage school safety type information. And they've been a great help to me in my career. I've been able to work with them directly. And I've had some dealings with TEA as well. And I look forward to continuing to provide input to them as they try to sharpen the tools that they're providing to us.
Because really this is newer, would you say? A newer need that we have in public education. And so I'm sure that at Texas State, the Texas School Safety Center has been around. However, they've probably started to just hone their practices towards recently, would you say? About how long has this been a resource?
Texas School Safety Center has been around longer than TEA. Their division has just recently been created in the last couple of years. And so TEA is kind of coming on board with that. And they're working in conjunction with Texas School Safety Center on a few things. And they both have their own compliance parts that they're working with school districts on. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff to Texas School Safety Center has been a self-report scenario, and they aggregate data to look at things as a trend analysis for the whole state. And they make really good reports so you can kind of get an idea of how things are moving from one 3-year cycle to the next, because they typically grab data in a 3-year cycle.
That's amazing. So is that where you received most of your training, or how did you develop your skills?
So I looked at a couple of different avenues. A lot of it was through what Texas School Safety Center has to offer. They have some in-person training that you can do. I also like TASBO, Texas Association of School Business Officials. They've had some safety things that very early on that I went and took just as Safety 101. Here's what school safety looks like. And that helped me get on the path of being able to give back in that organization. And now I'm an instructor and a mentor in the field that I was coming up into as well.
Giving back. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's critical if we're going to be able to pass on, because everything that you know and retain and you are able to use, I think you should give away for free.
Yeah.
Because as an educator at heart, like, you know and understand it for a reason. You should be passing that understanding as best you can to the next.
Oh, I love that.
And then I've also tried to make sure that I pay attention to first responders, working with them directly, but also our county Office of Emergency Management, and taking some very specific and high-level FEMA courses that are designed for not just a countywide emergency, but even state and national level stuff. So over the course of that, I've been able to get myself certified to be a Texas Department of Emergency Management instructor for what's called incident command courses. And so these higher level resources, so I actually just completed a class at Conroe Police Department where we taught a handful of officers, some firefighters, and EMS these advanced techniques on how to handle emergencies, not just a regional level, but even at a state level.
No, that's amazing, because obviously if there's an emergency of almost any size, really, we're going to have to rely on outside resources like our county officers, police department. And so that's really great that we have that collaboration and that point of contact to help us in a time of real crisis.
And we say all the time in that realm of emergency management, it's like, look, you don't want to meet them for the first time at an incident. So
isn't that true?
Get to know your folks around there. And so what's been a great opportunity for me is, like, the district has allowed me to get certified to be able to go teach. And so the first group of people was some of our local responders here within the county. So, like, if we call 911, the people that are showing up are people that we've had some opportunity to teach and help grow as in their profession. And so it's just like this big cycle that gets to continue.
No, just like a good teacher, right? Great relationships, right, Chris?
Exactly.
I love that, Paul. Love that. So with all this talk, school safety, sometimes that does put the general public, makes them a little nervous sometimes, Paul. Mm-hmm. And so we do fire drills. Every time I do a fire drill, I always get at least a couple of phone calls from parents. Is everything okay? So sometimes with recent events or past events, people don't forget those horrible things, right? And so how it makes people a little on edge. So knowing that, how can you balance that welcoming community environment on a campus that we want to have with school safety?
So I think it's like we're still schools, and we still function as schools, and we are here for students to gain knowledge and things like that. We want to make sure that they get home just as safe as when they got to us. That's a big part of what the vision has been for us, just in general.
Mr. Calvert speaks about that a lot.
Absolutely. So we all have the clear expectation of what he wants from us from a school safety standpoint. And that's first and foremost. But as far as a balance goes, I think as long as you are putting in time and effort towards, okay, are we paying attention to the things we need to within school safety? Are we preparing ourselves based off of what we feel like our capabilities are? Are we stretching ourselves to make sure that we're putting things like small discipline behaviors of just making sure exterior doors aren't propped open, or just pulling them to make sure that they're closed after we pass through them? Things like that, where we do these small disciplines. If we build those into the day, then we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we're as safe as possible. And then we make it a topic of conversation. You embed it in the culture. It's like everything that we do, how do we do it safely? It's not to say you can't do it, but if you can't do it safely, maybe you should consider what you're doing. And you can put plans in place, you can train teams, and you can have enough observation going on that you can do a lot of really interesting things, but still keep it safe for the staff and students.
You remind me, saying that reminds me about the big 3 safety goals that Mr. Calvert talks about all the time. And I can quote them from from my heart, let me tell you, because we've heard them so much. But it did remind me, though, how were those kind of developed, and how impactful do you think that's been?
Oh, it's extremely impactful, and credit Mr. Calvert, because it was his original idea to come up with the big three: badges, doors, and supervision. And the reality is if we can make sure that the exterior doors are closed and locked, then they can't get into our facility. If we make sure that the right people that are here and supposed to be here are wearing the right credentials, whether it's a Raptor badge for the day or a district credential, we can see that it's visible, then we know that they've gone through the appropriate processes or that they're supposed to be here. So that's the other part that separates them from somebody who may not be. And then the last part is supervision, right? Just paying attention to our kids and to our staff and what are they doing and how are we making sure that we're keeping an eye on everything as we're doing different kinds of activities. I think if we have all three of those things in place, it does a couple of things. One, it mitigates majority of the things that you're going to encounter. Two, it's a very simple message that's easy to implement. Even there's nobody that doesn't understand what the expectation is there. And so it's not hard to implement. It's a quick and concise message and allows us to be that much safer. And then we can build off of that. But if that was all you did to start with, that's a great starting point. And so for those that are trying to figure out, like, how do I make my environment more safe? How do I take a more safe approach to the things that I do? Up your supervision. Pay attention to how secure you are in a certain location and just understanding that in your environment.
You know, it's amazing how those three little things cover so many, check so many boxes.
Yeah.
And then it's easy to remember because it's just three little things. But that is a good place to start. And it is things that are so obvious. However, it covers a lot of ground when you just do those three things.
Really
so I
does.
love that about Mr. Calvert is able to synthesize information in such an amazing way and bringing it to where we can all remember and move forward with that. Must be the science teacher in him too, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, all of these people. I mean, you've named off the community, principals, APs, you've talked about teams. How do you keep them informed? How do you inform all of these people? Communication is so difficult, we know.
Well, communication's difficult, but again, it comes back to a discipline. Are you getting in front of the people and are you listening? It's a two-way street when you talk about communication. I can stand up there and tell you all the things that I think are important, but it's a better use of time for me to listen to what is on the minds of those campus administrators and make sure we're filling those needs. And it's the balance of the two that allows us to have a good result. But I think as long as we create structured time to get in front of administrators and hear what their needs are and meet those needs from a district perspective, whether it's training or facility upgrades, whatever we're doing from that perspective, that allows them to be heard, but we're also hearing it from the most critical place, and they're trying to manage a school. And so I want to hear from them as much as I want to give to them the things that I'm learning from a district level, because there's things that I have access to that I'm like, hey, I want you guys to understand how, like you mentioned, the Region 6 audits, how these intruder detection audits go. What is the process? What should you expect? What do we need to have in place? What are they going to be checking? So that everybody has a clear picture of what is going to walk through the door should they get checked that day. And so it's that balance that I think we have to do and make sure that we're communicating both ways.
Yeah, and again, making sure that there really is no finish point. This is evolving. There is no end to this. This is reflection, plan, reflect, repeat.
Absolutely.
And check your systems, like you said, because this is evolving. Anytime it involves people, you're going to have different people come in and out of jobs and roles. And so just a constant reminder of what our priorities are.
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to talk to you about, Paul, I'm interested. This is an interesting place if you've not been, Chris. Talk about your command center and how that's set up, what the purpose of that is. Sure. What are some neat little tools you have in there too? I noticed, that is a happening place.
So the idea here is that New Caney ISD has what they call Emergency Operations Center, and it's housed within our police department. And the point of it is that should something happen, whatever it is on the level of incident that takes place, we have a place where people can respond to start working the solution. And so there's some levels of technology where we can look at, Google Maps and just big screens where we can make sure that do we have a good situational awareness of what is going on? We have radios in there that we've been working for a couple of years now. I'm probably going on 3.5 years, where we've built this emergency radio network just for our school district that focuses on tying not just campuses to other campuses, but campuses to the buses, campuses to the EOC, and allows us to make sure that we can continue to have communications should something happen to the cell phones or anything like that. You want to have this redundancy in communication, because if you can't communicate, you're not going to be able to work as a part of a team. And if you can't do that, you're on an island trying to solve an emergency, and that's not where we want anybody to be. And so as we have this center that allows us to facilitate training for administrators when nothing's going on, we can bring them here and say, look at this, let's work from here and have a familiarity with the concepts and why we would be in this space. But also, should something happen, we have a dedicated spot that allows us to go to work.
You know, this does make me feel a little extra safe, Chris. I mean, I do feel safe on my campus. That's never been an issue. But when we talk about infrastructure, and we talk about systems, that's really the things I want to hear about. Paul's not just sitting, and his team is not just sitting around waiting for something to happen. This is a very proactive approach, Paul. I love your, so we have a command center. We have, if communication goes down, I hear you say we have a way to get communication back up, and that we would, or have established actually, and that we would be able to speak with the people that we need to speak with. We have systems in place when something should go wrong, and we do have a protocol of how to respond if something should go wrong. But then, after the fact, we have a protocol to debrief and make sure, because there's always, I'm sure there's always something we could have done better. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we practice that and talk about that, so that, heaven forbid, you know, something should happen in the future, we have already lived it and talked about it. And I mean, that should make people feel really safe, because it's more than just a book of policies, Chris. This is really, this is its own infrastructure, a living organism that is branching out to, I mean, because there's no teaching and learning now, you know, without school safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, and my guys work very diligently on keeping those systems up and running the facility. So we talk about, like, let's make sure we're meeting the needs of the campus. How do we grow this? What is the question they don't know to ask, but they're expecting us to progress these systems in certain ways. And so we're constantly trying to be proactive so that we don't have to be reactive from a system standpoint. And then if something happens, well, hopefully we've been proactive with our training and the team building and the preparedness that we can react and respond. And I think that's the biggest difference for me, is like, when you think about in terms of reacting and responding is implementing a plan with a team. Reacting is something just happened and we have to do something. But if you have a plan and a team, then it's more of a response mentality. And so that's the level of proaction that I hope we continue to foster, because reaction is just that. It just happened. You haven't had any thought beforehand. But response is, okay, we thought this was a possibility, and now it's time for us to implement all the things that we put in place. And so I think if people understand that mindset and say, okay, we're not saying it's going to happen, but should it happen to us, what do we want to have in place? How prepared do you want to feel? And what makes you feel prepared? And I think if you keep asking those reflective questions, then you will naturally evolve your training. You will naturally evolve the confidence of those that are going to respond. And then if something happens, we take a microscope and we look at it. We deal with the emotional side of it, and we say, okay, we're all okay, but now let's peel back the layers and see what we need to learn from this situation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's just, lastly, what is the biggest challenge? And I'm just talking about all over the state of Texas, not just New Caney ISD, but what is the biggest challenge schools face when preparing or planning for emergencies?
So I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you put that into the culture, and then getting the feedback. Sometimes getting the honest feedback about, like, do you want to say that you feel unsafe? You know, and getting to the bottom of, hey, I don't feel safe, and these are the reasons why. And getting to that point so that you can open that up to the teams and the things that you're putting in place. Because one of the things that I try to make sure I ask students when I have the opportunity to do, like a manners banquet or some community fair or something like that, I always ask students the same question: what makes you feel safe? And you know what their number one answer is?
What's that?
Teachers.
That's amazing.
Almost every time students say teachers. And so for me, the reflective piece is, okay, well, if the teacher makes them feel safe, what makes teachers feel safe? and that naturally progresses up to campus administrators. And then from there, what makes a campus administrator feel safe? Well, knowing that there is an infrastructure in place, knowing that there is a cavalry that will come, there's resources available, and that they can have those candid conversations about, hey, I don't feel so great about this. Can we talk about how we work on this? And creating an environment where it's okay to talk about that. That's the biggest challenge, is you have to create that environment where people will come to you earnestly and say, hey, I don't feel safe with this, or I don't feel like there's enough training. What can we do to change that?
Well, Paul, I'll tell you that you have checked that box, because I always feel very, very safe and confident to call you, even if I'm feeling a little nervous about what I might have to say to you. And so I really appreciate your service and all that you do to keep us, the staff and students, safe. What a great episode. We are so glad to have you, Paul. This is an important topic, and we never thought when we were doing this, we never knew all the things, all the people we need to interview, Chris.
Yeah.
No, and this has been a very important one.
Yeah, for sure. And we learned a lot, and it's such a critical piece of schools today. And we're glad you were able to teach us some stuff, Paul.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
I learned a lot today.
It's an honor to be able to do this role for the district. I appreciate the opportunity to share it with you guys. And we're going to keep working on it, and we want the feedback. And so for everybody that listens to this, if there's that one thing on your mind that you're like, man, I wish he just knew this, or if he's thought about that, we're an open book. We want to make sure that we're receiving feedback as much as we're trying to put information out, because at the end of the day, what makes you feel safe matters.
Yes.
That's important. Well, hey, we're going to take a quick break, but afterwards we're going to have a listener question. You want to stick around for that, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have a question. All right, we're back, and we have a listener question from a member of our Aspiring Administrators Academy.
Okay.
And what they want to know is, what is the one thing that anyone on the campus can do to make the campus more safe?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, and we kind of touched on this at the end, but it's all about communication for me. And so if you're an observant person and you're paying attention to your surroundings, that's where I want you to start personally, is just be aware of what's going on around you. And then there's going to be something that just doesn't make you feel quite right. You just can't put your finger on it, whatever it is, but that's where I want you to feel empowered to communicate with your administrators about, hey, I don't know what's going on with this, but this is what I see. And feel empowered, and be okay with approaching somebody if you don't feel like something they're doing is safe, or you don't think that the approach to the activity is safe. Just finding your voice in that moment to say, I think we need to do it a different way. You don't have to come down hard, but I think it's just finding that courage and confidence to address things that make you feel unsafe and communicating that to your superiors.
That's a great point.
That's a great point. Well, I wanted to just add the reason people are okay with speaking about that, because I know definitely at the campuses I've been, they have no problem going up to someone without a sticker on. They don't look familiar. They look out of place, and going up to them, or even if they didn't want to approach the person, coming right up to me. So I think it goes back to that culture that really the superintendent, Mr. Calvert, has created for us by pointing out the big three, the door, supervision, and prop doors.
Absolutely.
And so when we do feel safe and very empowered to just say, wait, just a minute, this is all about our safety. Have you checked in with the front office? So it really is that easy, isn't it, Paul?
It is.
If you just go and tell someone, if you see something that makes you feel uneasy, say something.
Well, and sometimes I hear things like, well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, or I'm really not sure if this is anything or not. And that's okay. The deal is, or I don't want to complain about something. And it's like, look, I don't take complaints. I just take information. It can't be labeled as a complaint if I don't take it as that. We're just trying to look out for each other. And if it's something that just makes you feel a little unsafe, then there's no harm in saying it to the next person in the chain of command and the chain of communication to allow for a decision to be made, to look at a little bit further. And so for everything that you do and things that are going on, just find your voice to say that one thing, because if we all do that, we're going to be much better from a safety standpoint. It's going to be embedded in our culture that much more. And then we all are giving each other an opportunity to respond to what makes somebody feel unsafe.
I love that, Chris. That's one of those questions that the person that wrote it probably thought we had some profound, Paul probably had, or myself or you had some profound answer. And I love when we can respond with something that is so doable and something that's easy to implement. And that makes you feel a part of the big system, doesn't it, Paul? I mean, I can do that. And so suddenly I'm part of life safety, Chris.
Yeah, we all are.
And we all are. I appreciate that, Chris, because we're all here and we can all look out for each other by just doing some small, simple things. And if we do that, they'll build into big things and they'll keep big things from happening. And so I truly believe that. And so for everybody out there, find your voice, say the things that make you feel unsafe, and then you're going to know that you've done your part in contributing to a safe environment.
I love that.
That's great. And I think that's a great way to close out the show. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and
thank you for having
helping us better understand the life safety in New Caney ISD. And I think that as a district, we're more prepared because of this podcast.
Oh, I would agree.
Oh, thank you. Amazing. Thank y'all very much. I appreciated being here. And if y'all need anything in the future, just let me know.
Yes.
You got it,
Thank you so much.